It gives me great pleasure to present to you Gloria Steinem.
Are we going to win? Yes!
Gloria Steinem is one of those women who, once noticed, isn't easily forgotten.
We are made to feel that we are nothing unless we are standing beside a man.
Some women are becoming more militant, and their organizations are grouped in a kind of federation called Women's Liberation.
These women are not kidding, they are deadly serious. What they are demanding is a greater share in the political power of this nation.
Females are supposed to stay home, have kids, and keep the house clean.
I like being treated as a lady, like having a man hold my coat, open the door for me, all the little things that I think are important to a woman.
Sure, the women's liberals are sincere, the homosexuals are sincere, but they want to change the supreme law of our land.
What we are talking about is a revolution and not a reform.
Gloria Steinem. She is the most visible symbol of the women's movement.
You understand, it's not a role exchange. We're not trying to do to men what men have done to us. We're trying to humanize both roles. Every generation has its own names.
More than a third of this march is women under 25 years old.
You know, people who empower other people. Susan B. Anthony said, our job is not to make young women grateful, it's to make them ungrateful. So they keep going. We're not going to stop. A feminist is what the dictionary says, which is a person, male or female, who believes in the full social, economic, political equality of women and men. And I would say also acts on it. When I first came to New York and tried to get an apartment, I discovered that landlords felt single women were not financially responsible, and if you could earn enough, you must be a hooker. The first year I freelanced, I spent a lot of time sleeping on the living room floors of my friends. I think that back then, I'm not sure I knew what feminism was. I mean, I'd had one sentence in my textbook somewhere in the past that said women were given the vote. I thought it was all finished, it was all won, and that if I was still having a lot of difficulty, it must be my personal fault.
Honey, when was the last time you baked a cake?
Last week, dear.
When I was growing up, we thought that the position of women was biologically dictated.
What a wonderful sight when your wash is done.
And so we didn't feel we had the right to be equal or to be angry. It was the 50s, and the women in college were still being educated to be mothers and the wives of executives and so on. And we were not learning about anything that had to do with women's own status in society. As a journalist, I wanted to write about what I was interested in, and that was politics. But there weren't so many women who were political reporters then, pretty few really. I wrote some unsigned pieces, what to do on dates in New York and how to cook without really cooking for men. I mean, all kinds of frivolous but funny things. And then I did this bunny assignment.
My name is Hugh Hefner, and I'm editor-publisher of Playboy magazine.
I worked as a Playboy bunny in order to write an expose of what the working conditions were.
I started with a personal investment of $600. In 8 years, I've built an empire worth $20 million.
It was being presented as a glamorous place. It was not the glamorous place that Hugh Hefner was trying to sell it as.
You were a bunny girl for a while, an undercover bunny girl.
Yeah. To write a story, I changed my name and went to. I thought I would get through, a few auditions and write about the auditions, but they were so desperate for people that it kept going on, and I ended up working off and on for about a month. I read all the ads, that you were supposed to get $300 a week, and it was this, wonderful job. I was hired, but I had to go through the training course, which is at your own expense.
Reverse. No, here we go. All right, fast. Okay, now real high carry. Whoop, there we go. Whoa!
It was horrible. There was nothing fun about it. It's really hard work. You know, you're carrying trays, you have 3-inch high heels on, you're paid very little, the trays are heavy, your feet hurt. I learned of what it's like to be hung on a meat hook. I mean, that's the emotional experience of walking around in a costume that's so tight it would give a man a cleavage. The response to the article was amazing because the club was new then, and it was kind of blowing the whistle on the glamour of the club. I regretted for many years having done it because it made me unserious. But as feminism began to dawn on my brain belatedly in life, I became glad I did it. I didn't exactly consciously know that I didn't want to get married. I just knew I didn't want to get married right then.
Have you ever been married?
No.
That's all?
Yeah, well, next question. Why not? Is that your next question?
Yep.
I don't know.
Do you want to be?
Eventually, but it keeps receding 2 years in the comfortable distance.
You think about it a lot?
Yeah, I think so. I think you imagine what it would be like to be married to people you're going out with or people you meet, even if it's only for a second. Think about it. Don't you think about it? No. You don't? Well, maybe it's a ladies' thing. I don't know. People ask me why I'm not married. I just say I can't mate in captivity. Be married? No. I somehow totally related to the character in Breakfast at Tiffany's.
Please, darling, don't sit there looking at me like that.
I love you. You belong to me.
No. People don't belong to people.
Of course they do.
I'm not going to let anyone put me in a cage.
I really identified with Holly Golightly. The streaked hair I can directly attribute to Breakfast at Tiffany's. The aviator glasses were more about hiding. The bigger they were, the more I felt like I could hide behind them. I came to New York, full of idealism and wanting to write serious assignments, but as a freelance writer, I was assigned things about fashion and food and makeup and babies, or the low point of my life, writing about textured stockings. When I delivered a piece to my editor at the Sunday Times Magazine, he generally gave me a choice, like either I could go to a hotel room with him in the afternoon or mail his letters on the way out. There was no word for sexual harassment. It was just called life. So you had to find your own individual way around it. At a certain point in my 30s, I discovered that other women were saying this kind of thing too, and the women's movement was just beginning. And I finally knew that I wasn't alone, that I wasn't crazy, the system is crazy. The idea that I had a glamorous life came in part, at least, from the idea that if you were a pretty girl, whatever that meant, that you must be getting assignments for that reason. Or if you were ever photographed at a party, that was your whole persona. You couldn't also be serious. So it did drive me crazy, to be viewed in that way.
Walk the sidewalks, out in the street. Women unite. Walk the sidewalks, out in the street. Women unite.
Women make up 51% of the nation's population. Are they, in effect, an oppressed majority? Feminist leaders charge widespread discrimination. Discrimination that keeps a woman from having an abortion if she wants it.
I went as a journalist to cover a hearing at which women were standing up and telling their abortion experiences.
Women are not going to sit quietly any longer. You are murdering us.
I had had an abortion when I first graduated from college. I was 22, and there was no women's movement then. There was no companionship. So I never told anybody.
All right, will you please sit down or be removed from the...
No, we aren't going to sit down. Why don't you give us some solid answers to our questions?
And I listened to these women testify about all that they had to go through.
Gets pregnant, she's treated like a common criminal. She can't get an abortion.
the injury, the danger, the infection, the sexual humiliation, to get an illegal abortion. And I suddenly realized, why is it a secret? If 1 in 3 women has needed an abortion in her lifetime in this country, why is it a secret, and why is it criminal, and why is it dangerous? And that was the big click. It transformed me, and I began to seek out everything I could find of what was then the burgeoning women's movement. When the women's movement started, I was the in-between person. I was neither the mother nor the daughter. I was in between, and perhaps that was helpful.
What sort of a reaction have you encountered from men or from women since you've let it be known that you're active in the women's rights movement?
Well, it's interesting. It's sort of, it's extreme, I think, in both directions. I mean, I now attract, at any kind of gathering, men who are very hostile to this movement. But the most touching response is from women, because it's like it pours out all the frustrations and humiliations, and it's I don't think I'd ever felt part of a group before.
Today, throughout the land, there is a growing demand by some women that society begin to treat them as men, different from men, but equal to them.
Most of this restaurant in Chicago is open to women, but a small part is set aside for men who want to have a quick lunch by themselves.
The bars and the restaurants, which women have been breaking the barriers in, are to us what the lunch counters were to the black movement. That's very serious and important.
We don't want to be intimidated by signs that say men's buffet. How about, would you like a sign up there that said blacks only or whites only?
It's the same principle, sir. Women are persons, women are people.
I have no intentions of taking the sign down or changing the sign. If you can get a court order to take it down, fine.
You have no intention of changing your policy of segregated facilities. Is that correct, sir?
If you women are that hard up for a glass of beer, I'll be glad to serve you at the bar.
Women are organizing themselves, complaining of oppression, demanding the same rights men have, and even talking of revolution. It's the blossoming of the feminist movement.
A woman can be a success in the business world, but it takes an exceptional woman, and she'll be fighting men's prejudices all the way. Women went to work in this country shortly before the turn of the century. Companies found they had no trouble adjusting to the dull, tedious jobs that men didn't want. Today, most women are still at the same tedious jobs, and they earn only half of what men earn.
Women can't handle the responsibility that most men assume.
Most women, I think, have a problem with concentration.
A woman's place is more in the home.
Theoretically, August the 26th next could be an awful day for American males. That is the 50th anniversary of women's suffrage, and to celebrate it, the women's liberation movement proposes a nationwide strike.
It was the first time in my life, and I think for many other women too, that we marched for ourselves.
Black and white, march down Fifth Avenue, hand to hand, legally, peacefully, non-violently.
I have no children. I'm not here as someone who needs a daycare center or who understood the need for daycare centers until about 3 months ago when I was writing about the West 80th Street daycare centers. It was then that I began to realize...
I remember when I got so frustrated with an inability to publish anything much about the movement that I actually started to go out and speak.
American children suffer from too much mother and too little father.
So I went with my speaking partner, Dorothy Pittman Hughes, an African-American woman. And wherever we went, it was just astounding that there would be these huge crowds.
We were quite interested in you. Obviously, women's liberation is a big thing with you.
Yeah.
And something, that I would certainly like to incorporate.
Well, but this is writing an essay and looking into the camera and reading it, right? I've started to speak in public regularly, and I've just begun that. On the subject of women, I thought I could explain it and make an emotional connection with an audience that perhaps, was rare among speakers on this subject. Women really do have a community of interest.
because we are relegated to menial and dehumanized positions simply because we are women.
The Atlantic City Boardwalk, young women from New York and from as far away as Bancroft, Iowa, all members of the women's liberation movement. And what are they liberating themselves from? Brassieres and high heels, female appurtenances that they think mark them as women who accept an ideal of femininity dictated by men.
Women use your brains, not your bodies.
In the beginning of the movement in the late 60s and early 70s, it was mostly treated with ridicule, bra burners and so on. But once it started to really change the mainstream of the culture, it became a threat.
It sounds like a demand for sameness, and that is abhorrent. To me, American cities compared to those in Europe present a relatively dull scene. But when American women adopted the miniskirt displaying much more woman, it was the biggest advance in urban beautification since Central Park was created in Manhattan.
People say to me now, are you not upset sometimes when the press is hostile? And I always say to myself, well, hostility is a step forward from the ridicule that we started out with.
Gloria Steinem is an extremely attractive woman. But most of the women that I see in the women's liberation movement, frankly, couldn't lure me out of a burning building.
There is a completely false image of feminists as being super serious and anti-sexual and anti-humorous, and, you know, it's crazy, but that's the way suffragists came down to me, too, as these boring, sexless creatures. To do that is one way to stop the movement. So perhaps because I was obviously publicly none of those things, you know, I was leading in what seemed to me an adventurous sexual life and all, and I, you know, doing all these diverse things, maybe I helped to break a false stereotype.
I did. But I quit just in time. There's some kind of natural political law about tap dancing, right? Tap dancing joggles the brain and it makes you conservative. Shirley Temple, George Murphy, Donald O'Connor, and there are more. They're all I got out just in time. I hope not.
Tap dancing was the extremely impractical way I was going to get out of Toledo. I could dance a little bit, so it was going to be my ticket out. For all little girls, I think, like for boys in poor neighborhoods who look at sports, you know, show business was the way we were going to get out. I still dance in elevators when the music is on and nobody's watching.
Gloria Steinem. You should know her. Maybe you've read her. She's written for most of the major magazines. These days, she's working for New York Magazine. New York, not the New Yorker. And the work she's doing is causing quite a commotion. She's very good.
Well, everybody's always asked me about her, you know. What kind of girl is she? She seems like a real bitch. Oh, she must be very aggressive and pushy. You know, they have these whole preconceived ideas of girl who gets to where Gloria is in life, what one has to do.
It makes me sad because of the bitch part. I mean, that really gets to me. I guess maybe it's worse than I think. I mean, I don't hear those comments, but what I've come to understand lately is it's not always personal. It is that all women come in for this kind of stuff. It's if you don't play your role, you know, if you dare to aspire to something, then you get it automatically. In the early 70s, Esquire printed a piece, and it was attacking me in the text of the piece, in a cartoon, too. This piece just seemed to take everything I'd ever done and make it seem as if it was all about ambition or selfish, as if I'd glommed on to movements insincerely. That article in Esquire was certainly among the most humiliating. I'm much too thin-skinned. I go back and forth all the time on it. I immediately decide to withdraw and never leave my house again. Then alternately decide to fight.
Your original assumption is that Steinem, indeed all women, could not succeed on the basis of simple talent, intelligence, ambition, and hard work. Esquire indulged in the cheapest kind of kiss-and-tell journalism.
I remember that press conference of defense against the Esquire piece. I especially remember Flo Kennedy, who was a great defender to have, funny and outrageous.
Means after you do something to us that we do not like in the media, you know, we take care of whatever part of your anatomy seems to need taken care of.
I finally read the Esquire article. The issue is very much larger than one small article. The issue is the whole way in which non-establishment people are treated in the press. As a member of it, I feel very responsible for it.
The Esquire article made me cry because it was just so wrong and cruel, really. I realized as a journalist that there really was nothing for women to read that was controlled by women. And this caused me, along with a number of other women, to start Ms. Magazine. We had many meetings about starting the magazine here in this apartment. We were going to call it Sojourner, after Sojourner Truth, but that was perceived as a travel magazine. Then we were going to call it Sisters, but that was seen as a religious magazine. We settled on Ms. because it was symbolic and also it was short, which is good for a logo. It's definitely an old term as an abbreviation for mistress. We didn't invent it, but clearly it was the exact parallel of Mr., and it had a great, obvious political use.
All revolutions, it seems, start with a typewriter in 3 crowded rooms over a bar, and the New York headquarters of the magazine Ms. is no different. It's a magazine designed to serve as a forum for the women's movement, something the leaders characterize as not a reform, but a revolution.
Welcome to chaos.
Gloria Steinem's the editor. It's disquieting to her, but nonetheless still hard to say whether she's attracted so much attention because of what she's done, what she says, or how she looks. Ms. Steinem will be 38 on her next birthday.
The idea of a feminist magazine seemed crazy to people. It was chaotic and scary. We were afraid that we would not succeed or we would disgrace the movement.
Many knowledgeable sources in media circles have predicted Ms. won't last 6 issues. But others point out it's mostly men making those predictions.
The first edition of Ms., described as a new magazine for women, is at hand, and it's pretty sad.
Harry Reasoner predicted that Ms. Magazine could not possibly last because we'd said everything there was to say in the first issue.
Last about 3 issues. I can imagine some stark anti-sexist editorial meeting trying to decide what to do next. After you've done marriage contracts, role exchanging, and the female identity crisis, what do you do? As I said, it's sad, because not even the most Neanderthal of us like predictability. I suppose, to these ladies, the most patronizing thing you can say is, I'm sorry. But, I'm sorry, I'm sorry.
It sold out hugely in just about a week. It was supposed to be in the newsstands for 3 months. It sold out in a week. The reason why MS Magazine is called MS is because women's marital status doesn't matter any more than men's does. Since I'm gigantically uninterested in your marital status, I don't see any reason to exchange that information for what you might tell me.
Some have taken to not addressing women by Miss or Mrs. They've gone to the Ms., MS. Why not do that with White House letters? I guess I'm a little old-fashioned, but I rather prefer the Miss or Mrs.
Ask if Sully got an impression about Ms. You know what I mean? Yeah. First, you had to say how many people really have read Gloria Steinem and what you about that. Yeah, you know what I mean? Yeah. That's Sully.
The less secure the male, the more he has to prove, the more dangerous a leader. Witness Richard Nixon. There is some opinion that Richard Nixon is the most sexually insecure chief of state since Napoleon.
Somebody once said that the woman a man most fears is the woman inside himself.
Doesn't Henry Kissinger more than compensate for President Nixon's sexual insecurity?
That's like, are you still beating your wife? Anything I say is impossible.
We were photographed together. And since Kissinger was, I think, pretty much the only unmarried person in the Nixon administration, somebody from the New York Times called me up and asked me about it.
This week, Gloria Steinem, almost unbelievably to me, is quoted as having said that she's not now and never has been a girlfriend of Henry Kissinger. But I would like to tell you, I'm not discouraged.
People think being pretty or beautiful solves everything, which of course it doesn't. The hard part for me, I must say the painful part, is I work really hard and then the result is attributed to looks. It's really painful. And you would think at 76 that would go away, but it's still there sometimes.
You know, there's a saying now, we are becoming the men we wanted to marry.
Oh,
And
wonderful.
Yeah, and it's very true. And I would go out with very nice people, writers, because I wanted to be a writer, do their research, see their friends, and wonder why I came to resent them later on. It wasn't their fault. They weren't telling me to do that, but society and all my training was telling me to do that.
I have known personally about 10 men who were all the way in love with you or part of the way in love with you. It's never anything...
Some of them were not telling the truth. I'm counting.
It's never anything you've paid much attention to, is it? I paid great attention. It meant a great deal to me to get men to be in love.
And I wasn't... I did too. It's the way, of course, women show our power by getting men to fall in love with us.
Probably partly because my father was a nice guy. I don't think I was ever really attracted to cruel or difficult men, which is a big thing. I mean, I was very lucky. My father was a charming, kind, lovely man, and he was a completely irresponsible guy who was always in debt. My mother was a pioneer in journalism before I was born. But she just couldn't make it all work together, you know, to be the perfect wife and mother and to have a pioneering career at the same time. She had what was then called a nervous breakdown, which made it difficult for her to keep her newspaper job. She just couldn't function. And she would always leave the radio on.
1370, the voice of Toledo.
It's the only sound in the apartment. She was always lying on the couch with her eyes closed, kind of talking to people in another realm.
This morning and each morning at this time, Monday through Saturday, Tidkey's, your value store.
I couldn't allow myself to feel what she was feeling. So in many ways, she became someone to take care of more than she was my mother. And I got to be very good at learning how to detach. It was extremely depressing and scary, very scary. To be a child taking care of an adult is very, very scary. My father was long divorced from my mother when we'd been in a car accident in Orange County in California. I should have gone right away. But I think that a deep part of me feared that if I went, I would never come back, that I would end up caring for him, as I had for my mother when I was little. So he died alone. And I regret that so much. I really regret that. In the 70s, it was heady and exciting and naive, because we thought these injustices are so great, surely if we just explain them to people, they will want to fix them.
The delegates include some of the best-known leaders of the women's movement. The image of what goes on here, as conveyed by the press, is important to both sides as they battle for public attention.
You have paid no attention to us.
Doing something.
We are in the middle of doing something. We are asking why these women have been treated we've listened to you for 100 years. How do you dare talk to us like that?
Sometimes the only way you can get attention to the problem, is to freak out people, as they say, is to dramatize it that way. You have to break the form. You have to stop playing the game in order to change the content.
And we support you with our dollars, brother. So don't get smarter, we'll fire you.
Flo Kennedy was outrageous. There's such huge punishment in the culture for an angry woman.
What the hell are you taking off your equipment for? CBS has a don't touch me. Don't touch. Get your fucking hands off me, goddammit. Don't touch me.
I think there's sometimes when only an obscenity will really say it.
You are the media. These are the people responsible for what has happened to women in this country.
This is where it all begins, the 36th Democratic National Convention. Tonight, 1 out of every 3 delegates down there will be a woman.
Nobody hands you equality. There's this myth in this country that women were given the vote. Women went to jail, demonstrated, and generally made such total nuisances of themselves. So we weren't given it, we took it.
Make history know that this was a different convention.
Next time around, they won't even be discussing, should a woman run for president? Can a woman run for vice president? It won't even be a should or a can. It will be a very natural thing.
Bella Abzug was such an extraordinarily valuable person. It's really hard to describe. And she was wonderfully comforting in strange ways. I mean, I don't know if this makes sense, but one of the things that happened that actually did get to me was that a pornographer put a big poster of me nude right outside the Ms. offices and a big sign that said, "Pin the cock on the feminist." Bella Abzug said, "What's wrong?" And I told her. And she was not impressed at all, And I said, "But Bella, you don't understand that there is a, drawing of me in full labial detail, and there are all these, penises down the side, and it has my hair and my glasses." And she said, "And my labia." And somehow she made me laugh so hard that it was okay after that. We've been much too law-abiding and too docile for too long, but I think that period is about over. So I only want to remind you and me tonight that what we are talking about is a revolution and not a reform.
I think we have to be responsibly aware that there are more than one voice in this movement, that there is a difference between me and Gloria Steinem, on the other hand.
In the early 70s, Betty Friedan gave a statement of some kind to the press saying that Ms. was profiteering off the women's movement.
It was following a luncheon of the new Democratic coalition that we finally were able to ask Betty Friedan about the comment.
You're the one who made the statement in a speech in Hartford, didn't you? She's just working in the movement for personal profit.
Mrs. Friedan would neither confirm nor deny the statement about Gloria Steinem.
I really question very much that Betty said that because it's so inaccurate, and we've had so many discussions about exactly this that I really question it. So I'm replying only to the statement as reported, not to Betty.
Do you plan to have other things to say about Ms. Steinem?
No.
Are you sorry you made the statement yesterday?
I have no comment.
Do you think it'll put a serious chink in the movement?
No, of course not.
What's wrong with Gloria Steinem?
Well, I don't think anything is wrong with Gloria Steinem as a person, or at least if there is, there isn't. It isn't my business to say so.
Really, anybody who threatened her ownership of the movement came in for this. The movement was hers. She was the mother of the movement. But then to turn around and find all these people trailing along and lesbians coming along and women on welfare coming along, she didn't really identify down, she identified up. And since I was part, in her view, of the group that was advocating this other identifying down, I'm sure that I was not welcome.
Ms. Steinem, may I ask you a question? You made a speech before the National Press Club this year, and you said, and I quote, "Women are not taken seriously. We are undervalued, ridiculed, or ignored by a society which consciously and unconsciously assumes that the white male is the standard and the norm." Now, what's your explanation for this serious state of affairs in view of the fact that males are at least virtually controlled and dominated by women from birth to puberty and often beyond that? Why haven't you done a better job if you're as smart as you say you are?
Well, that's your statement, not mine, that men are virtually controlled by women from birth onward. So, I wouldn't accept the premise of that statement.
Well, hasn't she an opportunity to brainwash the male during those early formative years? Why doesn't she do it?
Well, I think it's beginning to change, not to brainwash, but to be objective for a change and to eliminate the sex and the race stereotypes. I've just never felt compelled in any way to have children, and I don't have any regrets. I was obsessed with the magazine. That was my child, which it still is, actually.
When Ms. Magazine got going in 1972, other magazines, new and old, were sinking fast. But Ms. made it. Only 7 months after starting, it was in the black.
I humbly admit that I was wrong when I predicted that Ms., the magazine of women's liberation, would fold after 5 or fewer issues. Ms. has every right to feel proud.
Ms. has been added to the U.S. government list of acceptable prefixes. Ms. says the government is, quote, an optional female title without marital designation.
I'm always reminded of a quote which did not come from me, as is sometimes said. If men could get pregnant, abortion would be a sacrament.
2, 4, 6, 8, separate the church and state. 2, 4, 6.
We regard abortion as the method of last resort in birth control, but we say with equal fervor that it is a method which must be freely available to all who need it, for whatever reason. This wave of the women's movement established reproductive freedom as a basic right, like freedom of speech or freedom of assembly.
In a landmark ruling, the Supreme Court today legalized abortions. The majority, in cases from Texas and Georgia, said that the decision to end a pregnancy during the first 3 months belongs to the woman and her doctor, not the government.
In 1975, Time's Man of the Year is 12 women. But this cover, while rated by some feminist leaders like Gloria Steinem as a net plus for women, is being criticized by others who say Time's implication is that 12 women are equal to 1 man.
The point is that we go forward. We're nowhere near where we need to be.
This morning, Houston turned upside down for more than 33,000 women and men of widely diverging views who came to participate or to protest the National Women's Conference, a presidentially appointed commission with a congressional mandate to examine women's rights.
A torch held high for feminists who have come to Houston. It is supposed to be a symbol of progress toward equality and of the unity they hope to create here. 3 First Ladies of the United States, Betty Ford, Lady Bird Johnson, and Rosalind Carter, stood on stage in agreement with that purpose.
I would say of all the big events I've experienced, it was the most underestimated. It was so important.
Forces opposing the women's movement hope wrangling over such controversial proposals as lesbian rights will seriously wound the movement, while leaders of the conference are convinced they can win new friends for the movement.
The lesbian issue was serious. I mean, lesbianism was not really agreed upon, or discrimination against lesbians, as a feminist issue until 1977.
But all those in favor of the sexual preference resolution, please rise.
Then everybody did vote and say, okay, this is a feminist issue.
Be seated. Please stay in order.
I was crying, we were all crying. I think of it as just so moving.
The delegates adopted an agenda that was pro-ERA, but also pro-abortion and pro-lesbian rights.
After years of internal squabbling over where the women's movement should be going, the leaders say passage of the Equal Rights Amendment is the single most important piece of unfinished business. That until the Constitution says women are equal to men, the women's movement cannot move forward.
If they want us to become the radicals that they fear we are, just let them stop the ERA and we will become those radicals. We are the women that our parents warned us about, and we are proud.
Is your life much different from your mother's life?
I think she likes the idea that I'm a writer because in a way it's a continuation of what she hoped to do. Even though we never talked about it, it seems as if it happened by accident. I wish very much I could give her choices over again. She was living with my sister in Washington all the many years, before she went into a nursing home. I mean, she was still with no support, no companionship, no nothing. And I so regret, that I wasn't more of a companion to her.
Feminist Gloria Steinem is in Albuquerque, New Mexico.
She's been invited to Philadelphia to receive the Lucretia Model.
Gloria Steinem recently traveled down.
I fear that I distanced myself because I was trying so hard, or I was so fearful of becoming her. My sister called me, and it was clear that my mother was, in her last few days, I guess, so I was sitting with my mother, and she kept saying that she wanted to go home. And so I, as I remember so well, kind of lied to her one last time and said, I'll take you home. And then she just gradually stopped breathing.
A new book on the bestseller list is called Outrageous Acts and Everyday Rebellions. The book is written by Gloria Steinem.
Look, this is very messy, and I don't care if everybody sees the wires, but would you just get up there and do a little time step or something?
Barbara, only if you sing.
I'll sing.
I didn't think you would agree to sing.
The bells are ringing for me and my gal. The birds are singing for me and my gal. We need a finale. We need a great finale. And someday they're gonna build a little home for us. This is it. If you like her, send in your dollars.
You do a lot of this?
No, this is my first.
Really? Aren't you nervous?
Very nervous. The Today Show asked me to interview George Burns because they knew I was always imitating him.
Yeah, I heard about that.
Right?
You want a cigar?
I use an imaginary cigar. I say, I've got a tie over this. Well, you're part of my life, whether you like it or not. I grew up listening to you.
Good. It's nice to be part of your life.
Gracie on the radio.
What are you doing tonight?
That may be up to you. Any advice for me?
Well, when you go out with me tonight, you'll learn a lot about it.
I'm too old for you.
No, you're not. No, you're not. You're a pretty lady.
Tonight at the Waldorf, they are celebrating in the ballroom Gloria Steinem. This is the day we wish her a happy 50th birthday.
Smile. I will.
The revolution is playing the Waldorf.
Here are a couple of birthday wishes. May Jerry Falwell wash your dishes. May Nancy Reagan say, I get it. And Phyllis Schlafly, forget it. You know, girl, I may seem tough. Compared to you, I'm just a creep. Even some aren't used yet. You got books, but you ain't used yet. Love you, Gloria, love.
50 was hard. 50 was hard because it was the end of something, the end of the central years of life, I suppose, and I treated it with defiance. I'm going to go right on doing everything I did before, so there. Aging doesn't scare me. Death is another question. When I first got a diagnosis of breast cancer, I said to myself, so this is how it's going to end. Now, this was just a couple of days before I was supposed to substitute for Jane Pauley for a week on the Today Show, which already made me nervous enough. I had a tiny lump excised. I had radiation and no chemotherapy, so I was very, very lucky. But in a way, it served a real purpose of making me a little bit more conscious of time.
Are you able to feel as strongly about all these issues today as you did when you first started out, when you first became married?
Oh, God, much more. Much, much more. And it's a worldview. Once you start looking at us all as human beings, you no longer are likely to accept economic differences and racial differences and ethnic differences. So you have to uproot racism and sexism at the same time, otherwise it just doesn't work.
The problem is we are so accustomed, and sometimes women as well as men, to hearing as natural 60-40 or 70-30 as a male-female relationship, that when we hear 50-50, we are threatened by it.
What did you say about this? Yeah.
I feel this issue is kind of talked out.
Yeah. What issue?
What was that? Not that I don't agree with it, but I just feel it's just talked out.
If there were 4 men up there talking about how we're going to take over and in 4 years we're going to run the country, would you women sit here and listen to that? And I think this has all been said.
That isn't what we're saying.
But this is the gist and the feeling.
But that
as
isn't
a
what
man.
we're saying. We are not talking about taking over. We are talking about 50-50.
Maybe you're not in particular, but being a man sitting in the audience, there's this little, let's go women.
You feel like that's kind of a male bashing.
It's there.
What's wrong?
It is there.
Cleveland, Ohio, hello.
Hi, Gloria. I'm so excited to finally get to talk to you. I have a lot to say, and I'll say it real quick. First of all, I really believe that your movement was a total failure, and I believe you could admit that wholeheartedly. You are one of the primary causes of the downfall of our beautiful American family and society today. A couple questions. I'd like to know if you're married, if you have a husband, if you have children.
No.
No, you don't. Well, let me tell you. Don't ever have children, lady.
Your life is worse because Gloria is in existence.
Right. I have said for the last 15 years that Gloria Steinem should rot in hell.
You remember that, Carl?
No, how can I forget that?
Okay, because I wrote it down. The quote was, Gloria Steinem should rot in hell
for what she started. And I was like, ooh, Cleveland.
Yeah.
That shocked me. Do you get that a lot? Am I just naive? I thought you would kind of be like a hero to women, all women.
Well, no, mostly you get the good part. But being recognizable means you get the resentment too. I got to a place where I couldn't go forward in the old way. I was so exhausted. It was tough. It was tough. I was traveling all the time, you know, and I began to realize that if I went into a hotel room, they often leave the radio on. And I would always leap across the room and turn it off because it was so depressing to me to hear that sound. Because the radio was the only sound in the apartment with my mother. And it had taken me all that time to connect it. I didn't understand the degree to which my response was being magnetized by things that had happened to me before. So that was a huge leap forward. And I think that realization came out of being depressed. There was a period of time in which the world was kind of black and white instead of in color. And out of that kind of hitting bottom, there were at least a couple of years there when I began to really look internally. Revolution from Within as a book is part of that. It was sort of the coming out of it. Sometimes when I enter a familiar room or street, I think I see a past self walking toward me.
In a Manhattan studio, Steinem is recording excerpts from her new book, Revolution from Within, which strips away any lingering mask of invincibility.
But lately, I've begun to feel a tenderness, a welling of tears in the back of my throat when I see her.
Having set out to write a book on self-esteem, Steinem discovered she had very little of it herself. Cameras have been on Steinem's public romances for years. Such a leading feminist chooses a leading man, it's perfect grist for the gossip mill.
Do you need a man in your life to be happy?
Are you talking about sex?
A relationship.
What are you talking about?
Sure, let's talk about sex.
No, not now, actually, not at the moment, but that may change in 20 minutes, who knows? I mean...
Keep the cameras rolling here, please.
Gloria Steinem, it seems the most extraordinary book that you have written, simply because you seem somebody who really should have sorted out this self-esteem stuff long ago.
Well, I think it's probably almost impossible, you know, to sort out this self-esteem stuff. I was a neglected child, so I guess I didn't think I existed. And if you're treated badly, you come to feel you're a bad person. And to some extent, even a very good thing, like being a social activist, can be a drug, you know, that keeps you from going back and looking at yourself. You keep trying to fill up this emptiness, which, of course, can't be filled up with anything external.
I kept saying to her, you know, maybe you've got to find a way to get out of this so that it isn't going to take the toll it's taken. She said, how can I do that?
One of the country's most colorful and determined political characters has died. Bella Abzug was 77 when she died last night of complications from heart surgery. She was a member of Congress in the early 1970s. She was always ready to stir up an establishment that she said needed more women.
Bella Abzug always knew that women could do anything. She expanded all of us.
Over the years, I've introduced Bella many times. I had to introduce her because I was always an anticlimax if I came after her. And I often said at the end of the introduction, I never want to live in a world without a Bella Abzug in it. In many ways, she was the woman I wished I had had as a mother. Though to say that always made her mad, because she always said, I'm not old enough to be your mother.
the world's most unlikely bride files, feminist icon Gloria Steinem was married over the weekend.
No, I married at 66. I didn't tell anybody. I didn't ask anybody. I mean, you know, it was as much a shock to me as it was apparently to lots of other folks.
Steinem once said marriage made women semi-non-persons. She married entrepreneur David Bale at the Oklahoma home of former Cherokee Chief Wilma Mankiller.
We loved each other. We wanted to be together. He was kind of an irresistible force. It was the first time in my life, I think, since being a child, that I had been totally, utterly in the present. And I think that that was a lot of the magnetism for me.
Hello. Nice to see you.
Is this great or what?
This is just what you wanted. I know this is the first time the two of you have done an interview together. You must be thrilled. Greater love hath no husband.
I know. This is the ultimate test.
Some people might wonder, how does David Bale keep from being Mr. Steinem?
Oh, I don't mind at all.
You really don't?
No,
now I know you're secure. Most men would say, well, it never occurs to me.
I actually sometimes introduce myself as Mr. Steinem.
Do you really?
Yeah. That's fine. Why not?
And I get very upset. I said, no, he's not Mr. Steinem. So it's reversed. If we compete about anything, it's who's going to take care of the other one, because we both grew up being caretakers. David and I actually never got to the point of calling each other husband and wife. He became very ill after a couple of years. His illness was a brain lymphoma, and that is devastating. In a way, for me, it was going back to looking after my mother, but now I was an adult and I could do it. So it was as if life had given me a chance, you know, to live over a kind of experience. I learned so much from his illness, which lasted a whole year, and from his dying. He was in a nursing home, and that's where he died. And it was, you know, the first year was awful. The first year was full of anniversaries. You know, everything was an anniversary.
Cranky feminist Gloria Steinem.
There's been a lot of effort to demonize the word feminist.
Gloria Steinem, the 60s are over. Maybe you made sense when everybody was tripping far out, man, LSD, rock on! But I think we're a little more clear-headed these days. Thank the Lord Almighty.
I think that being a feminist means that you see the world whole instead of half. It shouldn't need a name, and one day it won't.
Feminism starts out being very simple. It starts out being the instinct of a little child who says it's not fair. And you are not the boss of me. It's something in us who knows that, right? And it ends up being a worldview that questions hierarchy altogether.
Is feminism dead? By the looks of this march in Washington, D.C. last April, more than 1 million strong, it's alive and well and attracting a whole new following.
More than a third of this march is women under 25 years old.
If I had one piece of advice to give to young girls, I would say, do not listen to my advice. Listen to the voice inside you and follow that. The primary thing is that they keep going. That's what's important. The kids have their own feminist heroes. I'm a different generation. The primary thing is not that they know who I am, but that they know who they are. As I look back at something that happened 30 years ago, and it seems quite recent, I have to realize that I may not be here 30 years from now. I've so loved being here. And I do hope to live to 100. I love it so much. I never want it to end.